Senator Ted Cruz, the Cruzerine, the Wolver Cruz. This guy, I will say, has absolutely been on this like a dog on a bone, and I highly recommend that you do pay attention to his podcast. Yeah. Senator Ted Cruz, can you hear me, sir?
I can, Stephen. Good to be with you.
I am glad to have you on the show as well. You know, something just remarkable just happened live while we were broadcasting. CNN was saying there's no evidence whatsoever of any kind of voter fraud or irregularities. I think the two have been conflated. And, of course, the Georgia Secretary of State just said they're going to do a manual recount. That was not aired on CNN at any point. This is really concerning to us. We've obviously been covering it. What is the path here? What is the strategy with specific Senator Ted Cruz? Because something needs to happen quickly for Americans to not lose faith.
Yeah, look, you're exactly right. I'm sure the CNN story was amplifying the New York Times headline today, banner headline that no voter fraud anywhere in America. And the basis for this is they called all the election officials, which in these blue states, many of them are hard partisan Democrats, and said, hey, did you guys steal the election? And they responded, no, we didn't steal the election.
This is a legal process. Don't get too wonky for us, Senator Cruz.
It's a little bizarre. It's like, we called all the bank robbers and they promised us there are no bank robberies in America. Like,
right.
If there is fraud and you're asking the people who are running it, they're going to tell you there's not. This is not subtle reporting. But you know what? The New York Times knows that. They want to write that headline.
Well, let me ask you this, because they keep saying there's no evidence of fraud. And I think we understand there's a difference between fraud and irregularities. So coming up to the election, we document this. We had a tallying. We had kind of a total tally.
The latter, Brand will fix.
Right. Yes. Well, wait, what was that? I didn't hear what you said. Who will fix?
The latter, irregularities.
Yes.
Regular brand will fix.
Oh, and I stepped on your joke, and it was a poop joke, which is wonderful.
Oh, man.
Don't eat.
I know my host.
Yes, absolutely. It's a crappy show, but we love having you on. So they say no, because we were always very clear there were up to 2.7 million ballots that we said could be compromised. And we said there's a difference between ineptitude, the post office not being effective enough to get these votes in time, as well as voter rolls that weren't accurate, as well as people who maybe received double registrations. We were very clear in saying that. The media just keeps saying no hard evidence of voter fraud. So let me ask you this. Specifically, what evidence is there either of irregularities? We've covered quite a few here, right? How many ballots could have been accepted beyond the actual election date? Something that's really suspicious, of course, is that mail-in ballots have been accepted at a rate of 30 times what they were accepted in 2016. Allegheny County, their Board of Elections, they just said they had to count over 2,000 undated ballots. We personally on this show went through voter rolls in Michigan, Senator Cruz, and we found obituaries of the people who voted. Now, I can't say that there are many thousands because I don't have the research crew, but we confirmed dozens. What hard evidence is there of either irregularities or voter fraud? What do you plan to take into battle?
Well, Stephen, I'll tell you what evidence matters, and that is the evidence presented by the legal teams in court in the formal challenge. And here's how this operates. We had the election 8 days ago. Mm-hmm. After the election, there have been multiple lawsuits filed across the country in multiple states challenging the results, either calling for recounts, mandatory recounts, or contest litigation, other cases challenging the results. It's now incumbent on the Trump legal team to go and present their evidence, not on Twitter, not on YouTube or on TV, but to present it in a court of law. That means coming in with expert witnesses, coming in with statistical analysis, coming in with direct witnesses who can testify as to specific fraud, and to quantify the case. And the way our legal system works, look, I got to say, it is hard and frustrating just as an informed citizen to know really what's going on. You watch Twitter, you see allegations all over the place. Right. It's not clear, is it zombies rising from the dead all voting? What's going on?
Right.
What matters is what they can prove in court. And the process we have to determine what the evidence is the legal adjudicatory function. And so there'll be cases in state court and federal court where the fact finders, either the jury or the judge, will listen to the evidence and conclude what the facts demonstrate. And then from there, if the Trump campaign is able to demonstrate that a sufficient number of votes were illegally cast, such that they should not be included,
right,
they may be able to flip some or all of the vote totals. But that's what it will take to change the result from where the tallies are right now.
Well, let me ask you, because that's the legal battle, but what do you believe the strongest arguments are for Americans? What should they know here? Because obviously you don't want to be on the hook making a claim that hasn't been verified in court yet, and I understand that. But for Americans out there, what are the strongest claims, arguments, or evidence that you would point them to if they are talking with people regarding voting irregularities or potential fraud? Because like you said, some people out there are sharing stories that aren't true, but there is a lot of information out there that is true, that is concerning. Where would you say Americans should look? What's the strongest point?
So, Stephen, the strongest point I would say is start at the beginning, which is wait and let the process play out. The legal process, these results are still being contested in court. And I'll give an example. So the media has now called it for Joe Biden. They want everyone to shut up, and they say if you dare disagree with their call, that you're somehow undermining democracy. Well, that's not actually the way our Constitution works. It's not the media that picks the president. It's the American people. It's the voters. And let me point to a very specific example, which is in the year 2000, Bush versus Gore. The media on election night called the election for Al Gore. I was working on the George W. Bush campaign. That's where I met Heidi, my wife.
Right.
I remember that night. They said, Gore has won Florida. Al Gore is the next president of the United States. All sorts of red, white, and blue. Ta-da, the media makes the call.
Right.
They just had one problem. The votes weren't there. As they counted the votes, George W. Bush had more votes in Florida than Al Gore. Now, they ended up retracting their call because they realized it was catastrophically wrong. And by the way, every network was catastrophically wrong.
And one thing, too, to be clear about that, a lot of Americans, because Kevin Costner made a movie on HBO, they don't know that recounts, there were recounts that went on, and then it just eventually had to halt it. Was it 37 days?
So it was 36 days, and there were a total of 4 recounts that happened in Florida. So the Al Gore team came in. Every time the votes were counted, George W. Bush won every single recount. I was part of the legal team, and you and I have talked before on your show about my new book, One Vote Away.
Yes, One Vote Away.
There's an entire chapter on One Vote Away on Bush versus Gore. Oh, wow. So if you want to understand really what happens in a recount, what are the legal issues, how does this happen? If you want to understand what's going on right now, go to Amazon and buy One Vote Away. It's actually been 5 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list, which, as you know, drives them back.
Yeah, they really don't want you to be in the New York Times bestseller list. Like, Chelsea Handler, can you write another book about drinking and sleeping with a lot of people? Please, whatever it takes to bump him off. Hardcover, softcover, nonfiction, digital. Give me something. Let me ask you this, because the difference between Florida and this, obviously, is there's one state, Florida. Now there are many, and really Florida comes down to too close to call, right? That's what it was. That's why we needed the recount. Nowhere near the kind of widespread irregularities, and I'm using my words carefully here. I would say there's some indications of outright misleading voting practices that you could see in some precincts, but voting irregularities, there wasn't this in Florida. So now that we're looking at a multi-pronged approach, what should the rollout plan be? Does there need to be a priority on one specific state? Is maybe Georgia the right place to try and put all hands on deck since the Secretary of State is starting now? He started the process with a manual recount.
Look, Georgia is a hugely important fight, not just for the presidential, but we've got
Runoffs.
2 Senate seats, a runoff on January 5th that is going to decide control of the Senate. And so those Senate elections, it is hard to think of such an epically important election as this January 5th election, because the difference between a Chuck Schumer Senate that will unleash the crazies on the far left versus a Republican Senate that will shut down the most damaging ideas of the far left, it's dramatic.
Yeah.
But set aside Georgia for a second. Let me take your broader question. Where we are right now, let me give you good news and bad news. The good news is one reason to have.
Wait, hold on a second. You didn't ask me if I want the good news first or the bad news first. My doctor usually does that. He says, you want the good news first or the bad news first? Then he tells me about my cholesterol and how I have a fat ass, and that's the good news. So
I'll give you caffeine first, and then I'll amputate.
Okay, all right, good.
The good news.
Okay.
If you look at in this COVID strange election cycle, the ballots cast in person on Election Day, Trump won the significant majority of those ballots.
Right.
The early ballots cast by mail, Biden won the significant majority of those.
Sure.
If you look historically at election recounts or election contests, in-person ballots tend to be pretty reliable. There's less opportunity for mischief with in-person voting. So typically, the votes count on election day stand.
Mm-hmm.
Where you see in recounts and contests votes being discarded as being illegal, as contrary to law,
right,
are usually early votes and mail-in votes, which means there's some reason to expect, as these ballots are examined more closely, that some meaningful percentage of the early mail-in votes will be discarded as contrary to law, which means more Biden votes are likely to go away than Trump votes. So that's good news that we could see these totals shrinking.
Right.
The bad news you referred to is twofold. Number one, some of these margins are pretty big. Mm-hmm. In Pennsylvania, it's 45,000 votes. Look, Bush versus Gore in Florida, we had a couple thousand votes. Right. 45,000 is a lot of votes. In Michigan, it's 130,000 votes is Biden's lead.
Right.
Those are big vote totals. Because to prevail, you've got to demonstrate in the court that many ballots are illegally cast, and you can't just make generalities. It has to be specifically proven up. Here's also what makes it challenging. To win, to flip the outcome, the Trump legal team has to run the table. They can't just win in one state. They can't just win in Pennsylvania. They can't just win in Georgia. They've got to win in multiple states. And so that becomes harder because Biden has a lead in several of these states, from Georgia to Arizona to Michigan to Pennsylvania to Nevada. And to get to 270 electoral votes, Trump has to win not just once, and winning once is not easy, but he's got to win multiple times.
Right.
And so my advice to everyone is just calm down and relax and let the process play out. That doesn't mean pop the champagne and celebrate that Trump's going to win. We need to let the process play out and see what happens. But don't also accept what the media is saying, which is don't even bother with the litigation. We say it's over, so you must think it's over.
Right. Well, yeah, and I understand what you're saying. Obviously, the margins are pretty big in some states, but not in all states. And for example, as far as hard evidence, there have been 3,000 instances of ballots we've talked about just Nevada, where they appear to have been cast improperly. Those have actually been referred to AG Barr. Now, I'm not saying that those are all confirmed, but these are hills people are willing to die on, where they are willing to provide sworn testimony. We also have another 10,000 that's estimated right in Nevada, may have been people who aren't necessarily Nevada residents, and I know sometimes that's hard to identify. We have how many affidavits now of people who said that votes were delivered from out of state, or poll watchers were not allowed in, right? This is a concern too, is how can you tell? That's something that's hard to prove, for example, if a ballot was tampered with, because no poll watchers were allowed in. We do know that there were scenarios where poll watchers were not allowed in, for example, in Wayne County, where ballots were being handled 45 feet away from him. But how is that? How do you walk through that in a court of law? I think that's the concern of a lot of Americans, that if it were honest, we could be within those margins, but some of it is tough to prove.
Well, it is difficult. If you look at excluding poll watchers, we know that happened. We know that happened in Philadelphia. We know it happened in Detroit. In Detroit, they covered up the ballot counting room with poster board, so you couldn't look in. In Pennsylvania, initially what they were insisting is that the Republican ballot watchers be 20 feet away or 25 feet away. Well, if you ever tried to watch a ballot 25 feet away, you can't actually observe it. You can't see anything. You're not functionally an observer if you're 25 feet away on the other side of the room. The Trump campaign went to state court in Pennsylvania, got an order that they had to be within 6 feet. Even 6 feet is tough, but 6 feet is a lot better than 25 feet to be able to see what's going on. What is challenging in that instance is the remedy. And as a legal matter, what you do about the violation, it is not crystal clear what you do about it. You may, to the extent you can segregate the votes that were counted without observers. One remedy may be a recount focused on those votes to go examine them again.
Right.
I will say most courts, and this is true of state courts or federal courts, are very reluctant to exclude votes. It's a high threshold to get votes thrown out.
Right.
So the remedy for excluding the ballot watchers legally is a a minefield.
And I think the problem is not such a high threshold for votes to be thrown in. It's just, toss them in on a red wagon with the rest of them. And, I think people don't understand. You're voicing what a lot of Americans are trying to voice right now and don't have your platform. Their vote is diluted. Their vote is diluted when other people are not following the same process, and we don't know. But like you're saying, courts are reluctant because they don't want to dilute votes. But that's precisely what's already happened.
So I spoke yesterday with Catherine Engelbrecht, who's a friend. She's the founder of True the Vote, based here in Houston, that fights voter fraud all across the country. They just filed a lawsuit in Pennsylvania, I believe yesterday, with exactly the theory you put forth on behalf of some Pennsylvania voters who say their legal vote was diluted by election officials allowing illegal votes to come in. And that's what they're trying to present. And I talked with Catherine. I've talked with President Trump and with Jared Kushner and with the White House. What I've told them is they need serious lawyers to present evidence at this point. It can't be won or lost in the world of social media. It's got to be facts and evidence in court. And by the way, you can do it. I talked about Bush versus Gore, as I describe in the chapter in One Vote Away. We did that whole thing. There were, I think, 7 different cases in Florida, all challenging the result of the election.
Right.
We had a full trial in state court. We went to the Florida Supreme Court twice. We went to the U.S. Supreme Court twice. And by the way, when I say went to, I mean wrote merits briefs, 50-page merits briefs on both sides, did the oral argument, and got a Supreme Court decision. And we did all of that in 36 days.
Right.
The courts can move quickly when there is urgency, but we need serious legal teams to present that case and to create the basis for the courts to act.
And that's tough to do in Florida because their Supreme Court is just an alligator in a judge's wig. So, no, but I do, and I know that you're busy, but I really do have to ask you just a couple of questions. Let's do an apples-to-apples comparison because Florida, right, we'll take that. That's a state. Michigan. Yeah. We already have more evidence in Michigan of, again, irregularities or errors. We have a 6,000 vote flip, and then we have a local official who basically conceded that he lost, and then he won by 1,000 votes. That's already more than Florida, just in Michigan, and these are just mistakes where people said, whoops. These aren't the byproducts of investigations. So I know that you've given us some good news and bad news, but wouldn't you also say it's fair for Americans to think that there's substantially more smoke here than just Florida?
There is. It's clear there were some hard partisans. You mentioned the 6,000 vote flip in Michigan. That's a good example where you had a county in Michigan that had vote counting software that they had what they describe as a, quote, glitch.
Right.
That switched 6,000 votes from Donald Trump to Joe Biden.
Right.
Now, the good news is the system caught it. They saw the results, and the results were out of kilter with what they were expecting. They went back and did a hand recount, and they discovered the glitch. And so they fixed it. That gives some comfort that they fixed it in that one county. But that same software just in Michigan is used in a total of 47 counties.
In 30 states.
Now, the local officials there are arguing this glitch was idiosyncratic just to this county and it was based on human error. Maybe, but it sure seems to me there needs to be some very careful examination, and I hope the Trump lawyers on the ground are doing that right now and pushing for, okay, we know this glitch can happen.
Yeah.
Let's examine each of the other 46 counties and see if it did happen. That I don't know if it did.
Right. We don't know if it did, but what we do know is it happened there, and we had an honest poll worker. And we do know that we had other poll workers who were boarding up the precinct with Bristol boards and not allowing people in. So, in other words, if that same scenario occurs with someone else who is not and there have been no investigations, that can be a magnitude of which we've never seen. And here's one thing that I do, and I know we'll let you go because I know how busy you are. You're a senator. I'm a guy who hosts a show in pajamas, packing heat. But there was this private interaction with Washington Post. I don't know if you've had experience with him.
Stephen, I got to ask, by the way, those pajamas, were those actually, did you get them from Hef's estate sale?
No, I did not. I got them from, this is actually from the Planet Hollywood that was, like the Planet Hollywoods, when you get to the worst towns, like in Schenectady, it's just Tim Allen's pajamas from the Santa Claus. You know what I mean? Like they don't get the Judge Dredd uniform or the Terminator glasses. It's like, those are the Scott Calvin pajamas.
I see.
But remember that glitch that happened, or it ended up being a typo of 128,000 votes? that just went to Biden. All of them went to Biden, right, overnight. I believe this was this in Michigan, I believe? I believe it was Michigan, Wisconsin. I can't remember the state. But there was private interaction. I'm bringing up this image here. You can't see it, but for the public. This was sent to Philip Bump of Washington Post before we knew it was a typo, Senator Cruz. And he said, well, yeah, they counted votes in a mostly pro-Biden area. That's not complicated. So in other words, at this moment in time, he said, the Washington Post, their national correspondent, yeah, 128,000 votes at 4:30 in the morning, all for Biden. Nothing to investigate here, which to me says we found out it was a typo, but there is no voter fraud or irregularities. There is no voter fraud that would actually warrant investigation from the media. And that's what concerns me most with big tech. And we know that we're having these hearings. Please, please, please don't call me to the floor. How do you see this playing out with the fact checking right now when they have no interest in the truth?
Well, listen, as you know, the media, Trump broke the media.
Yes.
They're not even trying. They hate him so much. Of course, they're not fact-checking anything other than the only truth they are willing to contemplate is that Joe Biden will be the next president, because stopping Trump is their only objective. And if possible, big tech is even worse. I mean, you've had experiences with YouTube demonetizing you, downscaling your viewership. We've seen right now big tech is silencing the president's tweets. They're putting election warnings on anyone raising a question about the election. They put warnings and try to silence them and prevent people from seeing it.
There's a warning on this right now, Senator Cruz, right now below this.
I am sure there is. But by the way, let me say, even as you are like edgy comedian, please, please, please don't grow the bizarre Rasputin beard that Jack Dorsey has. I'm just saying.
No, I'll do my best. I can't afford to replace the bird feeders. That guy, I don't know. He showed up looking like he lost his Wilson, and I don't know if it was something that he staged, but. You know, I will say this, it does get frustrating a little bit as someone who has, you know, a lot of information, a lot of contact, where it seems like we have these hearings and they come forward and they say like, well, you know what, we don't really have control over it. When is something going to get done? We just watched on CNN, Senator Cruz. It happened live. And this is a very special moment in time because on this show, there's the CNN broadcast, and it's fair use because it's transformative, where they are literally saying, there is no evidence of any election irregularities as we simultaneously present them to the audience. This has never happened before in human history, this ability to actually accurately fact-check information. There was someone on CNN, an Asian reporter, who said, he said, well, it looks like Facebook have taken some steps to remove some pages that may be associated with Steve Bannon because those views may appear more popular than they are. It wasn't. These are untrue. They said on air, isn't it good that Facebook is removing views because they're not popular? That, to me, is terrifying. What can be done?
Look, and as you know, big tech banned the New York Post. Twitter took down their page for 2 weeks and wouldn't let them post. New York Post has the 4th highest circulation of any newspaper in America.
Right.
Big tech asserts the power to edit and determine what stories you're allowed to publish. And it is completely unhinged. You look at the media, you talk about CNN. You know, one moment that captures the era of time we're in is the CNN Chiron with the reporter there of peaceful but fiery protest, the building on fire behind him. And it's like, at this point, like do they? I guess they don't write the Far Side anymore. But I wish the Far Side were still coming. But I don't even know how you would. That's beyond a Far Side cartoon. Like, there's nothing left to make fun of because they're self-parodying. Your question is, what can we do about it? All right, there are different players in government that can do different things.
Right.
In the Senate, what I can do is support legislation with which I have, but the problem with legislation is the Democrats are all prostitutes defending big tech.
Right.
So they have the ability to stop any legislation.
Right.
The other thing I can do is shine a light. I can convene hearings, which I've convened multiple hearings. I can try to educate. I can try to make the public case, and I've done everything within my ability to do that. The other part of government under a constitutional system is the executive branch. The executive branch has the ability to convene a grand jury. The executive branch has the ability to bring an indictment. The executive branch has the ability to bring an enforcement action. I can tell you in 4 years, on the topic of going after big tech, I have met with personally for hours and hours and hours the president, the vice president, the White House chief of staff, the White House counsel, the attorney general, the deputy attorney general, the assistant attorney general for the antitrust division, the chairman of the Federal Trade Commission, the general counsel of the Federal Trade Commission. These are all of the executive branch officials with authority to bring actions.
Right.
The chairman of the Federal Communications Commission. The Trump administration has done some of it. I think the president is frustrated. He wants them to do more, but his team has not executed nearly as effectively as they need to. Here's the discouraging piece. If Joe Biden is elected, the executive branch will do zero.
Let me ask.
Big tech will run the Biden administration if Joe Biden becomes president. And so that means we're going to wait 4 years for a president with the guts to take on big tech if Joe Biden ends up our next president.
My final question on this is, I know you just mentioned different paths. What if there happened to be clear, irrefutable evidence, let's say, of one of these people acting as a publisher directly? In other words, actually trying to work directly with, let's say, a content creator or someone to try and manipulate or to try and actually publish content, not in a hands-off way, but in no uncertain terms. Is that something that could circumvent just the state, the legislature, and actually be fought in the courts if it's a criminal action?
So very possibly. Recently, Justice Clarence Thomas wrote an opinion at the Supreme Court that suggested that the interpretation most of the courts of appeals have put out of Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which has immunized big tech from legal scrutiny, that interpretation is wrong.
Right.
Justice Thomas's opinion is a big deal. He wrote it out there. I do think, especially if there's a Biden administration, but regardless, there needs to be litigation with smart, creative lawyers bringing the arguments that what courts have misinterpreted Section 230, and that needs to be litigated. That is a multi-year process. That won't be done in 36 days. That will be done over a course of 2, 3, 4, 5 years. But we need smart, serious lawyers doing that, and there is some hope for that. There is growing agreement. Section 230 was designed for a different world and needs to be changed.
Right.
How it needs to be changed is going to be a big legislative argument for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll talk about it more. I know when you have more time, you're busy. There's a lot going on. This is an election. The state of our constitutional republic just so happened to hang in the balance. But Senator Ted Cruz, the podcast is Verdict, and it is the book is one vote away. That is available on Amazon everywhere books are sold, correct?
It is Amazon, anywhere you get books are sold. I'll also note, since you're in your pajamas, so I'm here in my suit, but I'm at home, and so I will show you the fuzzy slippers I'm wearing.
Very nice. See, that's much more acceptable than pulling a tubin. Just some slippers, good, family friendly. We appreciate it, Senator Cruz. Thank you so much. I know you have work to get to. Thanks for taking the time, Senator.
All right. Take care. Thanks, David.